So, here we go. I'd like to introduce Julian here. And Julian here is the CEO, you call yourself not CEO, you call yourself a Chief Inspiration Officer?
I'm hoping that you can get either the company name or my title right, but let's...
This is Julian. And he's the founder of How Am I Going? And I've had the pleasure of working not just with Julian but with his team. And what I really love about Julian and working with him is all about creating culture. He's all about empowering his team to be their best they can. And I've seen that firsthand. And I remember once he said to me, you know, do you have any feedback for me as a CEO? And I was like, no, because what he does is absolutely brilliant. To watch his team and how they work with him and how they're empowered to be the best version of themselves is the best feedback you can have. And it's an incredible product. He's going to talk about how to pitch and how to get your brand out there in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian!
Thanks, Adrian. It's good to be here at the Speaker Rapid last talk of the evening. So I'm Julian, the founder and CEO, or Chief Feedback Officer, as I stupidly call myself, of How Am I Going? I know a few of you here. Hands up if you have already seen me in a mustache. There's a few lies out here. It's a new one for November. But hands up if you are actually trying to raise money now or next year, if you plan to raise money. Good audience selection, Elliot. We've got about 5% of the audience wanting to raise money.
But they come to learn how to pitch a brand as well.
Okay, all right. So, as you can tell, I have a bit of a funny British accent. It's not really a British accent, a funny English accent, is because I grew up in a town like this where we had red dirt roads on the way to school in the morning, and on the bus that we would get, we would look out for kangaroos and try to avoid those situations. And then somehow, somewhere along the line, I ended up in Sydney, the big city lights of Sydney. For me, that was a big city, doing science. And then from there, I ended up landing a job in investment banking, mergers and acquisitions, which was a pretty big step for me. And then I remember actually around about, where are we, 2019, 9 years ago today, I was in my first job. I was 5 months into my first job. And I was 5 months into my first job in investment banking, having come from a small town in Australia to Sydney to do science, to do investment banking. It was a very big step for me. My parents are very proud. It was my 48th day of work and without a break. So I hadn't been home for 48 days. And that means weekends, and that means working until at least midnight every night. And I got there and the clock just ticked over around midnight on the 49th day, and I just kind of had enough. And I sat there and I just went over to my manager at the time. His name was Toby, and I said, look, Toby, I'm sorry, I'm just spent. I'm just gonna go home, I'm done. I'd missed my friend's wedding. I'd missed my girlfriend's birthday party. I had missed, my parents' birthday party. And Toby says to me, he said, that's so incredibly disappointing. I'm so upset with you. I expected so much more from you. This is an absolute disgrace, and I can't stop you. If you want to go home, you can go home, but there might not be a job here for you tomorrow if you go home now. We have so much work left to do. I kind of, grumbled and walked back to his desk, and I went back to my desk with my tail between my legs. And I sat there and thought about what to do for about 5 minutes, and then I left. Fuck it. And so I went home looking at job boards, called in the next day sick with gastro, because no one questions gastro, right? So that was my cover. And bless you. Yes. We planned this earlier. This is good, yeah. And day 50, I walk into work, and Hugo, which was Toby's boss, calls me into his office. And so I braced, here it is, here's the end of the line. I've totally fucked up this opportunity to get into the world of corporate finance from these humble beginnings. And I walk in there, and Toby sits me down, and he says, just want to say this is 6 months, you're in 5 months, your probation's coming up, and you're doing such an amazing job. and you're so far ahead of where we wanted you to be. You're learning and asking questions that other people aren't asking, and I really couldn't be more happy with your progress. And the last thing that we can afford to have as a team is to lose you due to burnout. So sitting here, it's Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., and I want you to take a week off, go spend some time with your girlfriend, spend some time with your friends, come back in a week's time, and hopefully that gastro sorted itself out with a bit of a wink on his face. And I have no idea to this day if he was telling the truth about that positive feedback, if he actually meant what he said, but it doesn't matter. And that was the power of positive feedback and the power and my first experience with someone giving you compliments or advice when you didn't really know how you were going and you thought really differently about how you were going. And so much so that I got a promotion a year later and ended up getting poached by Goldman Sachs. So that was my experience with feedback, my first positive experience with feedback. Part 2, I'm working with Goldman Sachs. It's the middle of 2013. Anybody here worked in finance before or currently working in finance? Yep. You remember 2013 running to 2014. It was a great time to be in finance. It was a fucking bull market, right? You go and put 20 pounds under a rock, come back a week later and find 25 pounds. Everything was going in the right direction. And in fact, also, I was working really well. I was loving it. I was working really hard. Clearly, this was my calling. I got flown to New York. I got promoted early to meet Lloyd. Purchase a clicker, that would work. And then touch Lloyd, touch the ball, all that fun stuff. Worked on very high-profile deals in Australia. And then I went back to Sydney at the end of that tenure to walk into my managing director's office to get some feedback based on the traction that I had and the success I had. And I sat down in front of him and he said, Julian, your feedback is that you're underperforming versus your global peers. And I think you need to consider whether this is the right career for you, whether this is where you need to be, because I'm not getting the commitment from you that I want, and I'm not seeing this as the path forward for you. And I'm sitting there and just like this wave comes over me and I'm embarrassed and I'm angry and I'm confused. I'm like, where was this the last 6 or 9 months when I was asking people to take me out for coffee and I was trying to take them out for coffee and get feedback, and there was just watered down compliments, or when I asked and sent emails out, people didn't respond to them. It was all a bit too little too late now. So I reflected. Anyone here brave enough to admit to having a shitty performance review? Couple? Good, lots of honesty in the crowd tonight. So it kind of felt like I was back in the toilet in a way after all of that. And however, it turns out this situation is all too familiar, unfortunately. And there are 2 reasons for that. The first is not getting in range of your laptop. The first is that we have this little almond-sized thing called an amygdala that controls fight or flight. And sadly, although we feel very advanced as a civilization, we're still stuck in the agricultural revolution, and we can't tell the difference from a saber-toothed tiger in an uncomfortable conversation in the workplace. So with the choice between the 2, we run from that conversation. We don't say the things that need to be said. The second problem, or the opportunity for us, was that still around 3/4 of companies use no formal software for employee peer-to-peer feedback collation. And we just know now, there are a number of psychological studies that show that that's not the right way to get the right words out of the right people at the right time. So we at How Am I Going, which is the company I founded, Elliot, we are building the world's easiest and most effective people progress platform. We're doing that because we want to prevent 1 million people from having the shitty, painful performance management processes that I've had. And there really are many more people than that. We estimate there are around 300 million people around the world that are having shitty, painful performance management processes like I are. And it's causing a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And that's the mission that we're out to try and solve. Our solution so far that we have is a very beautiful online platform that makes it much easier and more enjoyable to give and receive feedback. It's a psychological safe space. We use the Jobs to Be Done innovation framework. We're focused on the employee, not the employer, because it makes no sense for us to tick the box for 2 to 3 HR directors from a compliance and legal perspective when what really drives performance is ticking the box and making life easier for 200 to 300 employees underneath them. We focus on the team as a unit of change, not HR, and of course we incorporate a lot of holistic content around that. I guess what's most interesting though, and what I will say is Obviously, I'm here to talk about fundraising. The reason is, sadly, I would like to have said that my time at Goldman Sachs wasn't my last time in finance, given the raping I had. But I did a bit more time in banking with JP Morgan. So I've raised over £1 million with the business so far, and investors include founders of the biggest private equity funds in Australia, and also the chief of staff to the former Australian Prime Minister. So this is my startup, this is the money I've raised. Before then, I sat on a number of panels. I worked with many CEOs, raising money for them, for public and private companies, and being in the middle between investors and investees, and helping people secure the funding for their business going forward. So I've got 5 tactics that I've pulled out today for fundraising. I'm not here to tell you how to pitch physically. That's what Elliot does. He's much better than me at that. I'm here to talk about some of the unique learnings that you probably won't find immediately on Google. I'm not going to tell you what sections you need for your pitch deck. There are a number of good blogs on Google that will do that, online that will do that. I'm here to talk about a couple of learnings that I've had and backed up with a little bit of science, because you remember that I am a little bit of a scientific nerd at heart. So the first one is start with story. And for those that are already members with Elliot, you'll recognize this. There's nothing new to this about that. I will talk about something, why we do this for those that are new. And there was a really interesting study which put 2 people inside a functional MRI machine at the same time, and was recording their brain waves as they were talking. And it would, at certain points during the test, get one person to start to tell a story to the other person with the words such as 10 years ago, in 1993, or when I did this, whatever the case may be. And what they found was that when people told a story, the same parts of the other person's brain would be in sync almost to the millisecond. And we have this built in our DNA, built in our evolution. That's how we pass down knowledge for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And we're no different now. So when you tell a personal story to someone, we enter into this kind of very lull, this very trusting, hyper-trusting state. We can't wait to hear what comes next. So when you're trying to pitch for investment, you're trying to get trust, you're trying to persuade, and our DNA, our psychology is such that when you want to do that and you want to connect with someone, telling a personal story is the first way to build that connection. But it must be personal. It doesn't have to be about you. It can be about someone you know, someone you love. But an investor will want to know, why are you so particularly invested in this vision, in this mission? Why will you get up and do this when the days are hard? Why will you carry this through to the end? Why is this so important to you? So telling that personal, vulnerable story is critical. But also it's because this may not be your last business. And I don't know if anyone's ever heard the phrase before, but investors are backing often the jockey more than they're backing the horse. And that's very, very critical. I've had investors that have come to me and they've said, well, I have no idea if this is going to work out or not, but I trust that if it will, you'll be the person to deliver it. So even if your horse feels ugly or stupid, know that you are the jockey and people are backing you. So your story needs to be personal when you are pitching. It's got to be the first thing you talk about. Be vulnerable. Just because they're investors doesn't mean you need to put a big shield up in front of you. Don't be scared to go to that level. The second thing is that your story should be emotionally charged. And by emotionally charged, I mean there should be some deep sense of feeling in that will make it memorable for them. The reason I say that is because the part of our brain, again, the amygdala, that controls fight or flight, that is responsible for memory, likes to secrete this thing called dopamine when we hear about an emotionally charged event, which makes things much more memorable for you. It's like where we all remember where we were when September 11 happened, but you probably forget where you put your keys this morning. There's nothing emotionally charged around that. The second thing I'm going to talk about is design matters. I see a lot of really shitty pitch decks that haven't been formatted properly. A lot of people that haven't taken the time to really caress the font, to really caress the colors, the flow of the charts and the story, and there's too much content on any particular slide. And this is really important because really we are visual animals. There was one particular survey recently where they looked at when they showed people a piece of text or they heard it, within 3 days the average person recalled 10% of that information. If you instead added a picture or an image to that, then people recalled 65% of that information 3 days later. So we remember 6 times as much about a pitch when there is imagery. So avoid the temptation when you're pitching to investors to flood your slide with text. Instead, put an image like a really stupid jockey on a bucktooth horse and talk about that instead. It's going to be a little bit more memorable. Also, we like to look at beautiful things. People that discount design, I think, need a little bit of a wake-up call. We have this whole part of our life called art. I think you've heard of art. We like to look at beautiful things because it's nice. It makes us feel certain things. If that weren't the case, then fine, a black and white really shittily formatted presentation would work. But it won't. It is the subtle design salesperson. We see something like this, or like that, and it makes us feel a certain thing much faster than words can. We need to read words. We judge things much more fastly when it's an image than we do with words. The part of our brain that describes how we feel about something with words is much more new than the part of our brain that's been charged with making decisions and with emotions. And that's just how it is. So design is your silent salesperson. There was a famous saying, I used to get so pissed off in banking when the managing director would rip apart your presentation because there wasn't consistency in the tables, or there wasn't consistency in the fonts, or the colors didn't match, or things weren't aligned. And we would think, what is the point of this? Why does that even matter? And they would say, well, if the design is sloppy, if the formatting is sloppy, people will start to doubt the content behind that, and they will look more closely into the numbers. So when you are able to show that attention to detail, have that consistency, you build not just admiration for the extra work and attention to detail that you have put into it, but you build trust. So that's very important. I wouldn't overlook that. There are a number of really good PowerPoint templates or Google Slides templates now online, which you should use. Failing that, pay someone 300-400 quid to format your pitch professionally. It will make the world of difference and make you feel 10 times more professional than the person that looks like they pulled something together quickly, without much care, without much attention. Does anyone here already have a pitch deck that they're running with? Good. The next thing is around being resilient. So I find often when I speak to people and speak to friends who want to raise funds, but there's just something that's preventing them from taking that first step, it's usually the fear of rejection. So what I would say is that if you want to raise money, it is easier than you think. There is much more money out there that wants to find its home in young, energetic entrepreneurs than you think. So the first step is to be resilient, but be very open to feedback. You're going to get this a lot. You're going to get guys, sadly, usually guys, that will sit there and give you a bunch of no's. Say, I'll think I'll pass. Sorry, not for me. But that's actually good. What you want to do is you want to get to the no. The worst thing you can have is a maybe, because then you're left in limbo and you don't know where somebody sits. Interestingly, I've pulled a few stats here. So this was one of the earlier members of Twitter and Foursquare. He said that they would have 99% no's whenever they went to speak with investors. Obviously, we know the fate of Twitter and where that has gotten to. I mean, finding an investor is really like finding a partner. It's like a marriage. You really need to find someone that A, at the right time and place, has the money for you, and B, believes in your vision, which is the harder part to match. So if you speak to 5 or 6 people and think, well, I'm never going to get funding, you just haven't statistically gone to the level that you need to get to. You've really got to play the numbers. To bring this to life, Catherine Minshew, which is the founder of a company called The Muse, had 148 no's. It's uncommon for people to count them that much, but she had 148 no's until she got to a yes. Raised a lot of money since then, but had a number of stumbles before she got there. And finally, Reid Hoffman, who was a co-founder of LinkedIn, said if you're laughed out of the room, it might actually be a good sign. And this is because investors suffer from this thing we called FOMO, and they're a bit like sheep and they like to follow the herd. And when an idea is so new, right? It's often ugly and nobody's willing to back it, right? So we need to be aware of that and realize that that's often when you are onto something. Everybody disregards the thing that is new to market. So what you need to develop is not a Sony PlayStation, but like a lizard, is you need to develop very thick skin. I would say go out there when you're starting to fundraise and your goal should be to get as many no's as you can. And rather than being disheartened at the no's, write down the reasons why people are saying no and work with that. And then follow up with an email in 3-6 months' time and say, hey, if I solve this, does that then change your stance? Does that change your perception? It puts the investor in a very interesting position because it's very easy to say no because of some reason. Then you say, well, if I fix this, then are you interested? It puts them on the spot. It holds them against their word. This is actually, I couldn't believe this photo existed. I thought that was photoshopped or something, this one here. But it turns out this is like a whole shoot with these two lizards here. So I was like, so I call like thick skin and chill. Anyway, that's my, so the fourth one is really counterintuitive. But I would encourage people, when you are up against a skeptical audience, to tell them why not to invest in you. And you might think, well, hang on, don't I need to like give my best self and just be super confident and super bravado and show them why the world is going to back me and why I'm going to be the next unicorn? Well, actually, there's some data and some studies to suggest the other way around. We all know who this person is, I assume. David Kemp, Tony Blair, and then interestingly there was a study by a guy called Jeffrey Haddock. He split a group of British citizens into two groups. The group A had to name 2 things that they disliked about Tony Blair, and the other group had to name 5 things. Interestingly, and this has been proven over and over again with a number of different studies, it was really easy to name 2 things you don't like about someone or 2 things you don't like about something. It's much harder to name 5. And so the people that were forced with coming up with 5 things they dislike actually found it harder to find that many things. So they thought, well, he must not be that bad then. So they actually ended up liking him more than Group A, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But that's what happens. So those that were tasked with coming up with 5 things liked him a lot more. The same thing is a study that's been repeated where they asked people to come up with 3 things that you like about your life right now, which is pretty easy. And then they asked people to come up with 12 things that you like. And they could come up with like 6 or 7 or 8, but not 12. So like, fuck, well, my life must be pretty shit if I come up with 12 things. So the people that were asked to come up with 12 things and come up with 7 or 8 rather than 3, which should be an additive equation, ended up not liking their life as much as the people that like 3 things. And so this can be applied with investing. I don't know if anyone's heard of Babbel, not the language app, but the parenting content app for Disney. They use this to their advantage. And when they went to raise their first round of VC investment, they started off with the slide, 5 reasons why you should invest with us. And then they raised $3.3 million. And then a few years later, they went to Disney with a pitch and they said, here's why you shouldn't buy us. And they ended up selling themselves to Disney for $40 million. So why does this work? This works for skeptical audiences for 4 reasons. It's disarming. When people are waiting to be pitched, there's a level of anxiety. And when you tell them, hey, here's what's not good for us, here's what's not working for us, they laugh and then they relax. It turns from a pitch to a discussion. You turn them into problem-solving allies. Also, it creates credibility. It shows that you are not blind to the challenges within your business. It shows that you are actually probably a shrewd businessman. It creates a level of trust because there's the honesty and modesty in bringing to light the things that you know aren't working so well. They're going to find it out anyway. If you're going to do a deal with an investor, they're going to figure it out anyway. So being upfront about it can get you that trust and credibility. And the 4th reason, which is the previous 2 slides I showed you, when you put 3 or 4 or 5 reasons in front of somebody, it mentally blocks them from coming up with more. It's true. And so they struggle to find any more reasons. So they think, well, they must not be so severe after all, those challenges that they have. It's actually true. So I would encourage you guys to try it. The 5th and final one is to build a relationship with the potential investors that you want to speak with. When you want to be in your grandma's will or get some money or something, you don't turn up once a year and put that time in. No, you turn up every month and you say hi and you build a relationship. You tell her what's working, you tell her what's not. and you start to develop that empathy. And so I would encourage all of you that are thinking about fundraising to establish a newsletter, a monthly newsletter to investors. We do this at How Am I Going? It was some advice I've received. As a private company with no news broadcasts, no FTSE, no NASDAQ, you control the flow of information. So start to build your list of investors and give them a short monthly update. Tell them what's working, very importantly, what's not working, because remember, if they're going to invest in you, they're going to want to be excited by the challenges you face. No business is perfect. Apple is not perfect. Facebook is not perfect. We all have challenges. So being open about this on a regular basis helps create that relationship. So then when things come around, and so the reason this works as well is because of this thing called the exposure effect. These are very two nonsense words, iktik, taf, and sarik. You put these in front of groups of people and you ask them, which do you like? They'll choose an equal amount of each of them. However, if you expose one of the words to them 2 or 3 times before having to choose, they will lean towards that word for no other reason. They're completely nonsense words. The more often we encounter something, the more we like it. So by appearing in their inbox once a month over the course of 6-7 months, even if you think you're 9 months off raising finance, they're going to see your name, they're going to recognize it, they're going to like it psychologically a lot more than they ordinarily would. So it means when you do have that conversation with them and things are a little bit awry or not, then at least you're a little bit less surprised about it, or at least then you have that relationship so you won't be so disarmed about it. So finally, planning a fundraise. I've got 6 next steps because I like to make it concrete. Build a list of investors, speak to all of your friends, speak to your family's friends. You'll be alarmed to realize that you can easily find 15 to 20 possible people that could put in a check of 5, 10, 15, 20K. Those conversations will spur other conversations. Here are the tools as well that you need to use. Google Sheets is fine for that. Prepare a feedback doc. As I said before, get a Google Doc with all the good things people have said about your business and all the things they don't like about it. Make efforts to address the things they don't like if you think they fit with your business plan, but also be proud of the things that they do like and make sure they're at the front of your slides. Design your opportunity. I don't say pitch your business, design your opportunity. This is an opportunity for investors. It's not an ask, it's an opportunity, right? Assume that things will go well, they will make money, you will make money, it's an opportunity. Design it. Don't prepare slides, that sounds fucking boring. Design it because it needs to be designed well. Download a PPT template for that and then record yourself on Zoom. A lot of people send slide decks, it doesn't get read, trust me. Record yourself pitching to it on the side. Send people a link to your pitch. So then they get the best of both worlds. They get the slides, they get you talking over the top of it, but they don't get to download and send it to all their buddies unless they want to. And then scheduled calls, use Calendly. It's incredibly helpful because it syncs with your calendar and saves a lot of time. And then update your investors monthly using MailChimp so that they are aware of what's going on. And you're not there at the 11th hour rattling the tin needing to be saved. So that's it. I have 2 asks from you though. My first ask is, of course, there is a reason behind this disgusting mustache. I am raising money for Movember. Mobro.co/Julian Cook. Can't criticize me for this, Elliot. Or what I've been called today is actually look like Ned Flanders a bit. I don't know if that. Anyway, I have to take it. Secondly, if you in your team or any team you know feels like they could benefit from a refreshed process towards feedback and goal management and personal growth plans, then we have a referral scheme where you can make £550. So just email polly@howamigoing.com and we will look after you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. So can you just go back to when you started your 5?
Yes.
If you can go back to that. So does anyone have any questions for Julian?
Can I just ask one actually? At the end when you said about the monthly update email, which makes sense. Do you mean, when you're getting a list together of people who you want to pitch to and that you want to be on their radar, do you mean send like monthly update emails once you've kind of got in touch with a range of people and you're trying to source funding just so that they hear from you for a while, or is it only the people who actually invest in you?
Yeah, potential and current investors. So we have our current investors, and then we also have a number of people that we have spoken to about it. They may never invest, but they may talk to people that may, or they may be a future investor. It's not a cold email. It's not like an outbound campaign. It's more someone I've spoken to. Yeah.
Anyone else? Right.
So when I love this, tell them why not to invest. It's like proper, like, counterintuitive. Using my children, basically telling the opposite thing to what I want them to do. But to what extent do you kind of make that, personal to them, or do you kind of look at macro factors? I'm just interested in what kind of things do you put in there. How specific do you make to your business that you kind of almost read their minds, well, what might be their objections, and
Yeah.
bring it out before they can actually say it?
Yeah. It's a good question. So again, it depends on the audience about what you want to say. I mean, when we speak to VCs, to venture capital funds, we know there are a few things I'll look at. You can be a little bit cunning around it. So for us, for our business, we're a little bit too early to have a ton of data, and people aren't investing on us based on our cost per acquisition. But I will put as a negative, I'll say, hey, look, let's just address it. Our cost per acquisition is too high right now. And they'll say, oh, well, that's fine. Like, we wouldn't expect that now. And it kind of shows that you're working on it and you're thinking about that. Other things too, like if you've lost a key employee, just being upfront about that stuff. I say that opening the kimono, and people appreciate that. As I said, if they're going to invest in you, they will figure it out later on anyway.
Yes.
So being upfront about it builds that trust and credibility.
The last one, yes.
I was just thinking, what parallels do you see between, I can see a number between those 5 points for pitching for investment versus pitching for business.
That's where I was going. Good question.
It's very similar. I mean, people that buy from your business are buying from you. I think that the fundamental difference is what they expect when they invest in you. I think the people that buy a business from you have probably a 12-month horizon or a 6-month horizon. The people that invest in you are thinking a little bit longer term. So it goes back to that first point I said, whereas the people that buy from your business, you might get relegated to a customer success person or someone else. The people that invest in you really want to know that you're going to stick this through for the next few years, which is hard to get across. But yeah, showing that they're real, like, emotional pain, like this is really personal to you, helps them know that, okay, in 2 years when the chips are down, you're still going to want to drive this forward.
Right. The reason I wanted to bring this slide up is because, yes, he's talked about investors, but actually it's exactly the same when you're pitching a brand, right? Because who are your investors to begin with? The customers, right? So very much this is exactly the same process you follow when you want to get more clients, when you want to onboard people more and more. Even so much so that you might not, often if you look at copy, you look at marketing, you'll say, this is for you if, this isn't for you if, right? And being bold enough to say, you're not my client. It's okay. I don't want you to be my client. The reason I wanted to bring it back is because what he's really done is, while he's talking about investors, that's just a wide term for customers and partners, right? Partnerships. When you're investing and you're pitching a partner, so we do a lot of partnership pitching within Speaker Express because a lot of people have the right audience for us, but we don't necessarily, and we have a service that complements it. And often we do exactly this and also that, how this could not work and how it could work. So while Julian's honed in on investment, really think of it more expansively. Customers, your business, your brand. And again, even if it's not for now, what he shared for later is gold. Would you agree? Yeah? So let's hear it for Julian. Founder and CEO of How Am I Going?